Greetings, digital world. Welcome to another episode of Spliced In Later. Greeting to all my old listeners from YouTube, Spotify, everywhere that you've been listening to me the last 50 plus episodes. And also, I've added my podcast domain to a few other bits and bits out there. So if you're listening on one of those devices I did not mention, if you are new to the program, however it may be, welcome or welcome back. Always good to be talking to you on this delightful Tuesday as we do some more discussions about movies and TV shows and whatever else that I just happen to fancy talking about when we do these lovely little catch-ups. I hope you're all well. I hope everyone is doing fine in this lovely 2020. What are we talking about today, Jordan? Well, today we are going to be talking about a director, a favorite director of mine, and we're doing that for a number of reasons. I should not beat around the bush and just say straight off the bat who the director is, rather than give you the whole opening spiel while trying to not tell you who it is, hinting that you'll get to know the information later. Because as I always realize halfway through these introductions, that you will know what I'm talking about anyway, because you've just clicked on the episode, you're listening, you know what it is. So stop dawdling. Who are we talking about? The director I'm going to talk about today is Christopher Nolan. Now, the reason I'm talking about a director today and the reason I'm talking about Christopher Nolan today, a couple of different reasons. Let's get into them. The first being that over 50 episodes and I haven't really done a spotlight on a favorite director of mine. I've hinted at directors that I appreciate, their products, favorite films of mine from certain directors. A couple of weeks ago, I did some famous female directors that I like. In my top 10 countdowns, I always say this is a movie directed by one of my favorite directors. But I've never focused on one particular director and gone, this person's great and here's why. So that's what we're going to do, trying to keep things fresh and lively and whatever other words I can think of to explain why I'm doing it. The reason we picked Christopher Nolan, well, there's two reasons. The first being Christopher Nolan is, for me, the first director where I realized that I, as a movie connoisseur or someone who enjoys movies or whatever, started to realize that I like specific things from specific directors, not just I just like a movie because of what's in it. There came a point where I started to recognize skills, patterns, ways of storytelling, production levels, actors that are all associated with the one director, and I started to go, okay, cool. So I'm pretty sure now, based on what I've seen, on the products I have sampled, that a movie from this director, in this case Christopher Nolan for example, I'm going to enjoy. Christopher Nolan is not my absolute favorite director. He might have been once upon a time, but as I watch more and more movies, there are certainly other directors that are really clamoring for that top spot. Denis Villeneuve is normally at the top for favorite director, but recent products from Bong Joon-ho for Parasite and Snowpiercer. Every now and then I go through a Quentin Tarantino phase. Greta Gerwig films as well. There's always a juxtaposition, a changing occurrence depending on who I'm in the mood for, essentially. In many cases, sometimes I am in the mood for a Christopher Nolan film. But while he's not always my absolute number one favorite director, Christopher Nolan is the first one. The one where I realized I liked a movie because of the director behind it and the production, to a point that when another movie was coming out later on, I went, it's directed by Christopher Nolan. I would like to go to the movie theater to see that movie because of the director. So we're going to use Christopher Nolan as that example. And also, just a little hopeful tidbit as well, another reason for picking Christopher Nolan is, if we're very lucky here in Australia, if we keep our fingers crossed, if we plead to the almighty film gods above, we may be getting it in the movie theatres here in Australia in 2 weeks. On the 27th of August is supposed to be its official release date in Australia, New Zealand, and certain other European countries. America, unfortunately, has to wait until September 3 at the moment, depending on how things pick up over there. I'm apprehensive. I'm anxious. We all have. We've been chasing Tenet's release date. That's the movie we're talking about, Christopher Nolan's new movie, Tenet. It's coming as of July 17 was the first time, then it got pushed back 2 weeks, then it got pushed back another 2 weeks, then it was removed from the board entirely, just wasn't have any release dates, and now it's apprehensively put back as a staggered release. So some countries are going to get it before others, which seems to be the smart play at this point. 2020 is not going to allow theatre releases in the way that we're used to. You're not going to be able to pick a date at the moment and stick to it regardless of what's happening. But also at the same time, we can't just keep postponing films, because there's going to come a point where there's so many films to release and there's just not enough real estate for everybody. There are some options of releasing them on straight to streaming services, which have varying results from my research into it. Apparently, there are contracts which prevent certain movies from being released straight to streaming, even though they probably do well in it. For example, The New Mutants, a movie that has been delayed since 2017. I moved house about 3 times waiting for this film to come out, and we still haven't got it yet. Or they can break bonds and do what they can with what they've got. In the case of Mulan, they're releasing that on Disney Plus for $30, and that's being treated with all sorts of opinions. We won't delve into that right now. When we get closer to the Mulan release date, I will give you a whole opinion piece on what I think about this current strategy with releasing Mulan on Disney Plus and the price you have to pay in movie theaters and all of that. But that's a story for another time. For now, though, the new movie Christopher Nolan is directed, called Tenet, which we know absolutely nothing about. We've had 3 trailers. We still don't know what it's about. That's great. We have no idea who the characters are. We have no idea what the plot is. So it's a very intriguing as hell movie. So it would be great to see it. And it would also give us a sense of normalcy to be able to go to the movie theater as once before and check it out. And check out a blockbustery movie, a movie that reminds you it's summer, depending on what country you're in. Big name, big hype, everything like that. So with Tenet 2 weeks out, and with my fingers crossed that I'm going to be able to see it and review it for you, I'm going to celebrate the director Christopher Nolan with a look back at some of his other films and his impact on myself. So we'll try not to dilly-dally on each movie that I talk about. We're going to give you a sampling, basically. I want you to get to the end of this 25 minute plus podcast with an idea of some movies to check out, maybe some good remembrance if you have seen these movies, and overall an understanding of why I think Christopher Nolan is probably one of the great directors out there by far. He's not for everybody, but for me, he's certainly top notch. Love it, 100%. So let's get into it. The story of Spliced In Later and Christopher Nolan starts in a non-surprising way for people who have listened to my last 50 plus episodes and my favorite genre and my favorite movies and all of that. It starts in the superhero world. It was 2008 and I was at school and everybody kept talking about the new Batman movie that was supposed to come out called The Dark Knight. Now, I knew nothing about The Dark Knight. I had not seen Batman Begins, also directed by Christopher Nolan, which came out a few years before that. My engagement with the Batman films were the films of the 1990s, which are not the Batman that we are used to for sure. Batman and Robin is apparently considered one of the worst films ever made. I don't think it deserves that reputation, but it's also batshit insane. It's so weird. It's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. But Batman and Robin, basically, it's about Batman and Robin. They have to stop Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze and Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy from just causing havoc to Gotham. And there are wacky hijinks, silly fights, crazy henchmen, stupid plans, bat suits with nipples and ass cracks on them. It's so strange and so weird, especially if you are familiar with the Batmans that we have had in recent years at the movie theater. So I didn't not hate the movies, but they didn't impress me. I wasn't an avid Batman lover, supporter, fan, whatever. But everybody kept saying how they wanted to go to The Dark Knight, and people were arranging big groups to go and see this movie at the first chance they got. And I didn't want to be left out. I didn't want to be the only person at school sitting around not seeing this movie, because I wasn't what I was now, which is obsessed with movies. I liked any movie that I came across, but I didn't know anything about release dates. I didn't know anything about production. I didn't try every genre, as I've mentioned before. I always stuck in the same sort of lane and didn't really expand my horizons. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go see The Dark Knight with all these friends when the time comes. But I'd better watch Batman Begins first, just so I know what's going on. Because supposedly this is a sequel. I want to be familiar with who Batman is and all these people are, so I don't get confused. So I bought Batman Begins on DVD, and I took it home, and I watched it. And immediately I realized there was something different about this Batman world, this Batman movie I was watching. For the first part, it wasn't a cartoon. It wasn't silly humor. It wasn't basically aimed for children. This was a dark, gritty, very believably real story about Bruce Wayne, who lives in Gotham City. His parents are killed. He travels away to train himself up. He meets a league of assassins. He's trained. He defines his ability of what it is to be a hero, not to take lives, whatever. And then he returns to Gotham, becomes Batman so he can clean up his city, strike fear into the criminals that are running the town, all the mob bosses, all the supervillains, all of them. It is a very long movie, but it absolutely did not feel like nearly 3 hours when I was watching it. I was completely entranced by the story, by the music, by the production, by the characters, everything about it. My mouth was agape. I did not understand why I was so impressed by this movie and why I had not heard that it was this good before I saw it. And basically because of that, it is because of Christopher Nolan's main thing, which I love in all his movies, is his ability of the slow burn, where he will tell a story, but he won't jump from action piece to try and keep you engaged. He's all about setting up his characters and allowing you to learn about them in a very slow, powerful way. And there's always mysteries, there's always clues as to where the movie will eventually end up, but it takes a while to get there, but you are intrigued by every aspect of what's going on. The Batman story has been done to death. Even by 2005 with Batman Begins, you're familiar with Batman. You know who he is, you know why he is, you know about his side characters, his butler Alfred, the police commissioner Gordon, you know that his archenemy is the Joker. But watching this movie, Batman Begins, it does not take the simple standard premise of the Joker and everything else that Batman's famous for. It does a lot of other stuff, which if you're not familiar with the Batman comics, if you have not read them, it's brand new information for you. I knew nothing about the League of Assassins. I knew nothing about Ra's al Ghul, the Scarecrow, the mob boss Carmine Falcone, all of that, which is common knowledge now to people who read Batman comics. But for me, this was all brand new information, and it was intriguing. It was interesting. It was real. I immediately felt attached to Christian Bale as Batman. I felt a connection with him and his need to save Gotham. I felt he had a good family basis with his butler Alfred, played by Michael Caine, who brought some much needed levity to the film when it was needed. And everything that was going on, all the characters that came and went, all the pieces that eventually fell into place for the final big reveal of what the sinister plan was for Gotham and how everybody was involved and what Batman was going to do. It was interesting, it was intriguing, it was powerful, and I was thoroughly entertained by it, absolutely. So I finished Batman Begins and I went, oh my god, okay, cool. I've never been more excited for a film in my life. Now I'm about to go and see The Dark Knight in a week. I was very lucky that I didn't see Batman Begins in 2005 and have to wait 3 years for the next film. But then I went into The Dark Knight and I assumed I knew at least what the movie was going to be about because I'd seen Batman Begins. And what I was treated to was a whole new adventure with Batman and the characters that had been established, but a completely different genre, a completely different feel. You could describe Batman Begins as the origin story, the hero's journey, however you want to call it. When you go into The Dark Knight, it's not about Batman, and it's not really about the Joker, who is his primary enemy in this film. It is a crime thriller. It's full of heists, criminals outwitting the good guys, chases from between cops and bad guys, big set pieces of action and shootouts, and it's completely gripping and utterly entertaining. The Dark Knight is probably one of the best films ever made. It's on my poster. It's on my book. Well, it's not on my book. It's in my book, 1001 Movies to Watch Before You Die. And watching The Dark Knight, having just watched Batman Begins, I immediately recognized all of the storytelling methods that Christopher Nolan had established in that first film. I immediately appreciated all of it. It helped to establish the Joker as the bad guy. Heath Ledger's performance is absolutely astounding. One of the best performances in film I've ever seen. And it is a shame that he had to pass so soon after making this movie. But he also brought so much more to it in terms of the story that was being told. We got our origin story in Batman Begins. In this one, we got more of a view onto the criminal side of things, what it's like to be a gangster, a supervillain, a maniacal person, or in the case of a character, Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart, what it's like to be a hero like Batman, but to live in the light instead of the shadows, and how that affects both of them, and how it can be really good for one person and really bad for another. Again, these are very vague descriptions, and I hope that if you haven't seen these films, you absolutely will see them, because they are incredible films. The Dark Knight specifically. Batman Begins is a great film. There have been other films that are better, but The Dark Knight is one of those masterpieces in film that beat everything that was going against it. It shrugged off the whole a superhero movie can't be serious and dark and real and gritty. It can't win awards at the Academy for best performances and best story and everything like that. Christopher Nolan really left his mark on these Batman films. He really made them his own. He made them their own genre, their own feel. You know, he took the comic story and he put it in a real life situation. He used his ability of telling story to really make these comic book characters relatable to us. And he worked in conjunction with his partner in crime, Hans Zimmer, to produce some real atmospheric music and power to the stories that he was telling in The Dark Knight and Batman Begins. Hans Zimmer will talk about more in my upcoming episode. I'm really going to delve into music because it is a very important part of movie production, but something we're not going to delve too much into at this time. The Dark Knight was so entertaining. I saw it over and over again. I knew that it was part of a trilogy once I got into learning more about the movie after I saw it. So I had to wait 4 long, hard years for the conclusion to the Christopher Nolan Batman story with The Dark Knight Rises. Again, The Dark Knight Rises is the same Batman character, same Batman story, same Christopher Nolan way of storytelling, but it's a different genre entirely. This one is a siege film, or a terrorist film, or a war film, however you want to pick it. He takes a different villain, Bane, who's very different from the Joker or the Scarecrow from the other 2 movies. Tom Hardy gives him a performance that really makes him menacing and powerful, where the Joker was all manipulative and using his mind and brain and his need for chaos to outwit Batman. Bane was a strategist, a thinker, using brute force to get what he wanted. And he was all about not letting the world burn, but he had an ultimate goal of mind of apparently in his mind making things better with the actions that he was doing. Dark Knight Rises may not have been as good as The Dark Knight, but it was a very satisfying, awesome conclusion to the trilogy. I love the Dark Knight trilogy, and I appreciate what Christopher Nolan did in making them. And in many ways, probably alongside with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, really launching my obsession with anything to do with superhero movies. Now, after seeing The Dark Knight, a couple years passed, and I heard another movie was coming out, directed by Christopher Nolan. And as I said before, because I had loved The Dark Knight so much, I said, I want to go see this movie directed by Christopher Nolan. I don't really know what it's about, but he's directing it, and I appreciate his work, so let's go see it. This movie was called Inception, and Inception is one of those films that I saw when I realized watching it that I was not just watching movies for the sake of escapism or being entertained or to do something on a Friday night. I started to realize watching it that I appreciate the art of filmmaking, the ability to tell a story, seeing actors that I was familiar with returning in other products, recognizing music made by different people, film techniques, everything like that. This was a point where I went, this is something I want to be watching all the time. I want to be checking out movies constantly, to be craving the high and the feel that I was getting watching Inception. If you haven't seen Inception, oh boy, you should definitely fix that. That is also on my poster, and I believe it's also in my 1001 movies to see before you die. I'm not sure. Inception tells a very intriguing premise. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's all about stealing ideas and secrets by infiltrating the dreams of his targets. So he has a machine, he takes a crew, all with different set of skills, in the same way that you'd rob a bank at a casino in Ocean's 11. And he goes in and he extracts that information. Inception, he's hired by Ken Watanabe with a different goal in mind. He wants to do the same thing, enter another person's dreams, but this time he needs to implant an idea, not steal something, which requires a lot more thought, requires a big crew with varying degrees of skills, and the ability to go different layers. So a dream within a dream within a dream to go so far into the subconscious that you can plant this idea in someone's head and then afterwards have them have no idea that this was suggested to them. They have to think it was their own idea. It was brought to them from their own subconscious. What follows is a very exciting action film, especially once the characters go inside the dream and then they go a dream within a dream within a dream. They use all the information that we're sort of familiar with. We know about our dreams, but they explain to us how it works, and it shows that in a dream, time moves slower, depending on what layer of the dream you're on. There are different mechanisms and coping skills inside your brain that determine what you perceive to be real and what you know is fake. Defense mechanisms. Everybody has to survive not being killed. If you get killed in the dream, you're gone for. And then every time they go a layer down, that takes on a faster happening of circumstances than what's on the level above. And the further they go down, the more it all gets trippy. If the target starts to wake, then the dream starts to collapse and everything just gets thrown into a tailspin. Gravity doesn't work. Time and space fold in on itself. It's an absolutely mind-bending film with a very interesting mystery at the heart of it, which is the torture of Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He's been doing this for so long, but something happened to him a while back which has really affected him, has made it unable for him to see his children, and you start to learn what happened there and what he is in danger of losing himself if he keeps up this dream heisting for too long. Again, it's Christopher Nolan working with Hans Zimmer, the way he explains the story, the way each character is fully embodied, that you know their personalities, you know their quirks, you know their allegiances. Everybody is interesting. Nobody is in the movie just to fulfill a plot to get from point A to point B. Everybody has a purpose. Everyone has a drive. And watching this as well, I started to realize that a lot of actors in it had been in the Batman trilogy and had been in other movies that I knew had been directed by Christopher Nolan. So it's always good, especially in something like Quentin Tarantino films as well. If you see the same actors reappearing in the movies done by a director, you get that sense of trust, that sense of, I know if I use you in my movie, as I've used you in previous movies, that you are going to deliver the very best of the material that I'm giving you. And 9 times out of 10, works perfectly. Inception was such a mind-bending trip, especially in the movie theaters. I know it's hard to see it in the movie theater when this came out 10 years ago, but I also know that in certain movie theaters, Tenet was not released, but you can catch a 10-year anniversary screening of Inception in its place. So if it is available with you, why not check it out? It's definitely worth a gander. Inception is over the top, it's thrilling, one of Christopher Nolan's best films in my opinion, and looking at it and its return at the box office, once he made a huge name for himself with the Dark Knight movies, the amount of people that went and saw Inception guaranteed that every movie that Christopher Nolan has made after that has been treated as blockbuster status. It's brought in tons and tons of money to a point where, shot in the foot, Tenet now suffers from being regarded with that so much respect and need for it to be a blockbuster film that it just keeps getting delayed and delayed until an opportunity for it presents itself. But Inception's fantastic, and if you haven't seen it, it's definitely one of Christopher Nolan's best work. Definitely worth a gander. A side note before I continue on with our final little bit of this episode, if you can hear a leaf blower blowing around behind me, I apologize for that in advance. Regardless of me being locked up in another room with the doors closed, there's someone out there with a leaf blower and they will not stop. And they're definitely walking around my whole complex because sometimes I feel like it's gone away and then I have to cut out a whole bit with me talking because behind me it's just gone. So apologies, I'm sure it's hovering away in the background even now as I talk to you. But unfortunately, there's very little I can do about it except be mad at them. But I thought I'd just acknowledge that so you know what's going on. All right, got that little whinge out of the way. Let's move on to our final bit, which is my favorite Christopher Nolan film. And despite how much I've gushed over the Batman trilogy and the Dark Knight specifically, despite how much I just said Inception is one of Christopher Nolan's best work, my actual favorite of all time Christopher Nolan film is one that didn't make tons and tons at the box office, that was created before The Dark Knight made Christopher Nolan a household name. It's a little film called The Prestige. I love The Prestige. The Prestige is absolutely fantastic viewing. It's not too long, but it is very interesting. And it has everything that I love about Christopher Nolan, which is taking very complex characters, making them not so black and white. There's sometimes where you want to root for certain characters and other times where you hate their guts. There's a mystery, there's intrigue, there's magic, there's suspense, there's an overall twist, which really makes you rethink everything you've seen in the movie. If you haven't seen The Prestige, it's set in Victorian times and it's about two magicians. One's played by Hugh Jackman and the other by Christian Bale. They are very skilled magicians, absolutely, and they both want to be world famous, to pull off the ultimate trick so they can be respected and revered and remembered for all time. They start off as colleagues working together, but there's a sense of rivalry, a sense to one-up the other one, which eventually leads them to become bitter enemies to the point where they're out to sabotage each other at every chance they get and to risk their own lives and the lives of everyone around them just to one-up the other person and really perform that ultimate, most memorable trick. When you start the movie, it feels like Hugh Jackman is our hero of the film. He seems to be kinder, fairer, more lighthearted, whereas Christian Bale is closed off and mean and nasty, and he's all about the trick and he's not about connections. But as the movie progresses, Hugh Jackman is enveloped with an obsession to be better than Christian Bale to the point where he starts to forsake people around him and risk his own life, whereas Christian Bale starts to mellow out a bit every now and then. Not completely, he's still got that air of loneliness to him, but there's a point somewhere in the movie where you realize Hugh Jackman can be just as bad as Christian Bale if he sets his mind to it, and Christian Bale can be as nice as we once thought Hugh Jackman was if given the right opportunity. The tricks are very interesting, but what's great about it is it's never just implied that what they're doing is magic. The Prestige is part of a term for the magic trick itself. The Prestige specifically is when you want to impress your audience and you've made something disappear, the Prestige is showing them the result, how you did it, the ability to bring something back. It's very interesting. Michael Caine explains it much better in the movie, and he explains it in such a way that when all the twists are happening in the movie, everything just clicks into place. It cleverly tries to use the term that science is what gives us our best belief of magic. It tries to use historical figures that interact with our fictional characters. Specifically, Hugh Jackman interacts with David Bowie's Nikola Tesla and his ability to help him in his ultimate trick. It's very dark, it's very serious, it's very disturbing in certain places, but it is an absolutely mesmerizing performance. And the movie itself, the whole plot, really is one big trick, and you yourself have got to see what you believe to be true of your own eyes and what you have to tell yourself, no, that can't be right. I need to think about this film in a more fourth dimensional scale to know what's actually happening in front of me. I cannot recommend The Prestige enough. It is as good as it is because of Christopher Nolan's storytelling and his use of camera work and mannerisms that he gets his characters to portray, his way of telling story, his use of music and lighting and twists that has really held this movie in such high regard for me. When I look at lists of best Christopher Nolan movies, often you see the big blockbustery stuff, but it's stuff like The Prestige that shows that Christopher Nolan is first and foremost a filmmaker. From the looks of it, he's all about the experience of watching a film, and that's probably why as well he's holding out as much as he is to make sure that people can see Tenet in the movie theater. He's all about having the people experience the film the way it was supposed to. Also about offering new experiences. He doesn't just do the same movie over and over again. Each new movie he does, even a trilogy of Batman movies, has a different genre, a different feel, a different way of telling stories. The Prestige is top-notch, and I don't think it gets as much recognition as deserved. But if you have seen The Prestige and you're looking for other Christopher Nolan films, well, I can just fire off a quick bunch for you right now. There's Memento, which is Christopher Nolan's possible first film. He might have done some other stuff before that, but this is his first real masterpiece, I think. It's a very interesting story of Guy Pearce who has short-term memory loss, so he can't make new memories. So the movie's told in a backwards and forwards way. You see things that have happened and he has no memory of it, and you start to learn the story as he forgets the story, essentially. And it's told both from the start of the story and the end of the story. It's a very fun, unique way of watching a film. There's also Interstellar, a big space adventure, but very realistic sort of travel through space. in a distant future where humanity has gotten so bad that they've got to leave Earth, but they have to find a new planet to colonize. And it's a very logical way of looking at other planets, how time and space operate on different planets. Very big thinking movie. Might not be for everybody, but it is an impressive, engrossing feature, which I think definitely deserves more recognition than I think it gets as well. I think people seem to think that Interstellar got too big for itself. That might be true. I still think it's a great film. There's Insomnia, which not too many people know about. It's a crime caper. It's using police officers set in a area of the Earth where the sun never sets. So Al Pacino is trying to solve a murder, and the fact that the sun doesn't go down starts to mess with him because he can't get any sleep, and he starts not being able to tell what's real and what's imaginary. And a very rare turn from Robin Williams in this film, where he plays a villain, a menacing character. He does it very well. It's very disturbing. Not at all the Robin Williams we're used to. Definitely worth checking out as well. And also just recently, Dunkirk. It was a war film that told of the evacuation from Dunkirk during World War II, but told in 3 non-linear stories. So one story takes place over a day, another story takes place over an hour, and one story takes place over a week. And eventually all these stories sync up, but the way time progresses and what's happening to all these different characters is very different and yet not jarring. Definitely worth a look. Dunkirk was one of my favorite films of 2017. And again, I caught that because the new Christopher Nolan film was coming out. I was excited to see it, and it did not disappoint. So the moral of this episode here, this spotlight on Christopher Nolan, is basically to say that his movies rule, and I really appreciate the way he directs his films and the type of films that he produces. And also, as a thank you to him, because of the experiences I had with films and learning of my love of film, a lot of that started with recognizing Christopher Nolan as a director and the way he did films and the differences in his types of films. But in a point where I went, okay, I'm going to see movies because Christopher Nolan has directed them. And it's only spiraled from there into all sorts of other directors across many different genres. And it's not just directors as well. It's types of comedy actors, types of drama actors, storytelling, script writers, anything that I've started to notice patterns in what I like about, probably all stem from that first, I'll go check out Inception because I liked The Dark Knight and I'd like to see if I'm going to like this movie. I'll leave on a hopeful, optimistic turn that once you've listened to this, maybe you'll go check out a few Christopher Nolan movies, maybe you'll be excited to see a new one, and hope against hope, that in a couple weeks' time, I can talk to you about a brand new Christopher Nolan film, having just seen it, called Tenet. And maybe, just maybe, we can begin a slow climb towards how things were beforehand. Unlikely, but every little step counts, so we'll see how we go. Thank you once again for listening to me. I appreciate you as always. Go check out some Christopher Nolan films. Recheck out some Christopher Nolan films if you've already seen them before. Plenty of different films to go to, lots of different types, lots of different genres. You shan't be disappointed. You will be entertained. Until next week, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.